guys. This is a very important podcast episode because today, Mike, Trevor, and myself are going to tell you guys what probably a lot of you are doing wrong, or maybe at least some of you are doing wrong in this business. And it's something that I run up against all the time, especially as I put out YouTube videos, put out this podcast, and email a lot of you guys. And I'm sort of reaching a lot of new producers, a lot of new artists and bands that are just learning about sync licensing. And so there's a lot of common just mistakes and do not do's that I'm seeing happen over and over again. And that's expected because, especially if it's a brand new industry or a brand new thing for you, I wouldn't expect you to understand how to really approach this industry the smart way. But hopefully, if you're new to the business, you first listen or watch this podcast episode before you do really anything else in the business, just to make sure you're avoiding these very common mistakes, these very easily avoidable mistakes that so many producers and artists just don't think about, and they jump into this business without thinking about these things, or just not having a podcast episode like this from three professionals in the industry to let them know, hey, if you don't want to embarrass yourself, or more importantly, if you don't want to kind of burn yourself out very quickly in this business and not getting any results, then just follow along with these common sense guidelines. So the first thing that I notice for a lot of producers that just hear about sync licensing and think, wow, my track in a TV show, that's awesome, or my track in a movie, I want to do that, is they always look for the fast and easy path to do that. So this results in people basically sending their music to somebody and saying, can you please just shop my music for me? Like, we'll split the back end or the front end or whatever, but just go ahead and shop my stuff for me. I don't really want to go partner with a library. I don't want to partner with a sync agent. I don't want to really do any work or devote any serious time to this. I just want the results. So go ahead and give me the placements, right? Or the other flip side of that is some people will go to an online company, which I call cattle call companies, where there are hundreds of thousands of songs on the platform. They charge you a monthly fee, and you basically go, oh, okay, I just have to pay a monthly fee, upload my tracks to this website, and then I have a sync licensing career, and then I'm going to get placement. So again, it's always looking for the fast and easy path into this business that you'll usually, I'd say 99% of the time, you'll find that you are paying unnecessary fees to somebody that's probably not doing much for you, or you're probably going to be at a disadvantage because you're always going to have a middleman between you and the people that are actually making the choices to get your tracks placed. So there's really no shortcuts in this business to full-time income. If you want to just dabble and you don't want to devote any time to this industry, absolutely. Just upload your tracks to some website, give them to somebody, see what happens, right? But you might as well also go buy a lottery ticket for your retirement plan, because that's about the same kind of chances you have on it. It's not something that I would really rely upon. And if it's my music career, I want higher chances than that. I don't want to have just luck or chance, or be one out of 10,000 other people in a big pool of music and hoping that my track is the one that stands out. I just don't like those odds. I want to have direct relationships with people who invest in me personally, financially, who really care about my career, and I want to be able to serve them so that I get placements through them and through their clients. So just know that if you are looking for the fast and easy approach to succeed in this business, you're going to be disappointed, and you're going to be paying a lot of fees that will probably result in not much for you in the back end. So that's my number one tip. Get educated, devote yourself, and sort of set your expectations right that this is going to be a long-term plan. It's going to take you a couple of years to build up the kind of income to be able to see this being your part-time income first, and then eventually your full-time income. And that's not going to come with just dabbling in this business and once in a while submitting your tracks to a huge catalog somewhere and paying your monthly dues to do that. You're going to have to actually get a little bit more serious if you want to do this full-time. Okay, so that's my number one. Mike, why don't you go ahead and start off with your first one that you're noticing for the mistakes?
Yeah. So when I'm listening to tracks, a lot of times I'll hear like the biggest, most common mistake I hear is tracks being too complicated. And basically what that means is just, I know as an artist, as a producer or whatever, a lot of times when you're making your music, it's like, you're trying to a lot of times make this masterpiece, right? Well, the thing in this game is the music is only half of what's going on. We're, kind of serving the scene of, if it's on a TV show or a film, or if it's an ad or whatever. So there's always something else that's going on with it. So, sticking to one singular emotion, one singular idea is something that I know a lot of composers and producers miss, and I'll get a lot of tracks that are, I wouldn't say they necessarily go all over the place, but like I said, are these huge like masterpieces. They're trying to be masterpieces, and on its own, it works. And like if you're putting out an artist release and stuff like that, that's great to listen to by itself. But you have to understand that this music isn't there to just be listened to. There's going to be visuals on top, and most of the time the music it's not the forefront. It's there to just enhance what you're seeing. So that's the biggest common mistake that I always see.
Yeah, having focus, making sure that you're serving somebody's needs with this industry and not just going, well, my girlfriend thinks I have good music and she thinks it could be on a Mercedes commercial, so therefore I should have a career doing this. So it's got to be, have more thought into it than that, and obviously putting together something that's licensable for the partners that you work with. Yeah, absolutely. So how about you, Trevor? What's top of your list?
Top of my list. So this might be a little more long-winded, but the way I would describe it is falling in love with your own tracks, and then not seeing it as like, I don't want to say work, but as time that you need to put in. An example is like Kobe, for example. Well, a basketball player, for example, would go to the gym and put up tons and tons of shots. I mean, he's not winning any games going to the gym. Like, he's not winning the game today because there is no game today, but he is going to the gym and putting up 3,000 shots before he goes home and takes a shower or whatever. And that people in music don't do that too much. They kind of do a bunch of work, get a collection of music together, and then they're just kind of like, well, my work's done for a while. And then they fall in love with those tracks. They think that those tracks are songs. This is true with vocalists, really, in a lot of ways, and then producers as well. Producers are a little better about just pumping stuff out throughout the day and stuff. But still, I see it where they're just like, look, I have this amazing 10 things. I'm going to spend a bunch of time pitching it, and I'm going to fall in love with it to the point where, like, I think about how when I look back at my music, or even when I look back at like my business or at anything, I always feel like I'm better than I was anyway. So I easily can like let those things go from the past. I'm like, I was in love with those tracks then, but like, if I had them now in my hands, like, I just give them to like whatever company would take them that I believe in, and then move on and make more, because I think your quality can only be so high today because you're only so good today. And so you're doing two things as you're practicing, and you're just making stuff. You're writing tracks. You could be writing a great track or a bad track, but whatever it is, your skill is at a certain level today. Take that skill level, the product of that skill level, go get it somewhere, and then move on. And kind of approach it in that way too, of like, yes, there will be things that you just totally fall in love with, and you're like, you know what, these lyrics are about a hard time in my life, all this stuff, I want to keep this for like really good personal reasons. Cool, I get it. But all this other stuff where you're practicing, and the product of your practicing, whether it's like having, that's the good thing about this and not basketball, is you can't take a bunch of those made basketball shots from the gym and use them in your game, but you can here, right? You can practice and then go, oh, I have a couple tracks from when I was practicing that are pretty good, put them together, send them out, and move on, because in 2 years, I'm going to be way better anyway. So don't let me get stuck up on like, being so in love with my like current work that I'm not, expecting to be really good. Because I think the best way to put it is, you're practicing to get better. And so your goal isn't to just finish a song, is what it is, but it's also to be better than you were the last song you made. And so I think that people don't do this enough. And I see it in them, where there's like this, there's either a really slow progression in their production quality, or there's no progression, because they'll do the same thing and then they'll sit on that for a long time, as opposed to like practicing, then they'll have a bunch of product, and they've practiced and they're better now than they were then, and so on and so forth. And so I think that that's something that some of the most successful people do, and why they have lots of music out, and they'll say it themselves. They'll be like, hey, man, that track I did just 1 year ago, I hate, because I loved it then, but I hate it now because I've learned so much in 1 year from just a ton of practice. So that's one of the big things that it's not so much like a pet peeve or anything, but something I've noticed in producers and vocalists who they kind of are slow in that, when they should be just nonstop, like fast paced in them.
Yeah, and I'll definitely say that was one of my biggest mistakes early in my career, was not admitting my weakness and thinking, well, my mixes, I knew they weren't as loud and as impactful, and my drums didn't sound as lifelike, and my guitars felt very thin and very fake compared to the competition with the libraries that I was distributed through. And it was just always bugging me, but I didn't go do my hoop practice, right? I didn't go to the gym and just experiment with new sounds, play with my plugins more, figure out some other alternatives to do that. And it took me a long time to start to up my game and really focus on improving my mixing skills. So that kind of dovetails into my next number 2 thing for mistakes that a lot of producers make, is being real with yourself and admitting where your actual weaknesses are. I think some producers and musicians, we can think that our tracks, especially as Trevor said, it's totally true. You know, he asked me 10 years ago, I thought I had hit records, and now I listen to him like, oh my gosh, I wouldn't even play this for my friends and family. Like, I'm so embarrassed by what I was doing. But hey, it's where I was, and this is where I am now. And who knows, in 10 years, I'll be looking back at what I'm doing now and being embarrassed. So, you know, you can't really get stuck on those things and really regret anything. But obviously, the sooner that you can just become honest with yourself and realize, you know, my drums don't hit like their drums do. My track is not as loud. My strings feel much more kind of fake and synth and just more keyboard based, as opposed to sounding like a real live orchestra perform those, or whatever the issue is. You probably, if you just do a little bit of soul searching and a little bit of quiet time, you'll probably start to realize what those are. And you probably, if you're listening to this podcast right now, something is already probably popping out in your head of like, yeah, I need to kind of work on this thing. So my best advice would be, do not ignore that like I did for many years. Basically, you should just dive in and go do your hoop practice at the gym right now. You should go practice and improve that one specific thing, or that group of skills. You're just not quite there yet, because you can work with a library and continue to submit subpar music to them. They might even continuously accept your music. But that doesn't really do much for your career if you're the one composer on their catalog that's not really getting many of the placements. Sure, maybe the library likes your music for one reason or another, but you kind of know in your gut that yours is just not the one that's shining on the shelf. Yours is just not the one that's going to be popping off the shelf. And you certainly can maybe see after many months or years that you're not getting the royalties through them. And it might not be that library is sitting on your tracks and not pushing you. It might be they push you, but your tracks just don't shine like the other tracks in the catalog. So rather than just always like, well, I just got to play the numbers game, just putting in more music, more tracks out there, you might be getting in your own way by just wasting a lot of time and putting a lot of music out there that doesn't get placed. So take it from me. That's what I did 12 years ago when I first got started. A very small number of my tracks ended up getting lots of placements throughout the years. Most of those tracks in those early years have just collected dust. Even though it's not on my hard drive, it's collecting dust on somebody else's hard drive with the catalogs and libraries that I've been distributed through. So don't make my mistake and just take that time and improve those skills. So anyways, Mike, what's your second on the list?
Yeah, I think this is also a big one too. So I don't see this as number 2. This is kind of like, 1A and 1B from the last one. So, and that is really studying and following the brief. So the way that we work, we don't, as reverse play, we don't actually just take just take open submissions from everybody. So we specifically go out and let people know what it is that we're looking for. And we send out briefs and creative briefs, so examples, reference tracks, all that kind of stuff. We pretty much lay it out as to what we're looking for. But the thing about it is, a lot of times what comes back, you can kind of tell sometimes that, maybe the composer listened to maybe the first 30 seconds of the first reference track kind of thing, didn't take into account like all the other references, didn't try to think about like, okay, well, what is the essence of what we're looking for here? And either what you end up getting is just a ripoff of one of the references, or, or just basically just missing the mark. Maybe there's one element that's like, like, oh, cool. Okay. This is that kind of, I see what they're kind of doing here. Let me just do this. So I think that, a lot of producers and composers can start to, should study a little bit more as to what it is that their company is asking of them. On top of that, I think also studying the brand of their company that they're working with, and also the kind of work that they do, is also very helpful too, so it's a little bit of an art form, to kind of be able to read between the lines, and like, everything else. It takes a lot of practice, takes a lot of time, a lot of trial and error, and the better libraries will work with you on that, so if you missed it, like there'll be most people will be like, that are good will be like, okay, look, try again, kind of thing. And this is what, we can do to help you kind of thing. But yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that, and again, this plays into the same thing of my last point too, of, the music is there to kind of serve a scene, or it has a purpose, right? It's there as support. So it's not the main focus. So, you may get a brief and think like, okay, well, it's kind of in my style. Let me just do my thing, without necessarily paying attention to the brief. And that, a lot of times can, And you may think like, oh, I made the best track in the world, and why is this not getting played or accepted or placed or whatever the case is? And really, all it comes down to is just not following the instructions. So,
yeah, it's a big one, actually. Just like, accepting that your opinion is really not the one that really matters. That's a really hard one. That's a tough, big pill to swallow sometimes. I've had that situation with even some of the opportunities that I've put out there for the syndicate. Is I've had some members think that they are giving me exactly what they think the opportunity requires, and they're confident they're going to get it. And I hear it, I'm like, that's not what the client wanted. I can already tell this is not going to work for them. And sometimes, it's kind of getting out of your own way, thinking that you've got all the answers. It's really not about you. It's really about the client and about the project. And it's a beautiful thing when it all works out and you can serve that. But you're absolutely right about just following directions, not rushing into open up your DAW when you get that brief. You definitely should read everything, probably read it twice, maybe even 3 times. Watch the instructional video if there's one. Listen to those reference tracks for like an hour. Like literally take your time, unless there's like a deadline of like, we need this in 4 hours and you have to start right away. Most opportunities, you at least have an hour to kind of digest and really absorb what's being requested of you. And I think that's where a lot of producers you're absolutely right. They steer themselves in the wrong direction because they're too excited. They just want to, pull the trigger right away. And so they're not really listening to what's being requested of them, or really listening to those reference tracks, or even sometimes the reference track will not be what they want, but they didn't read the brief to understand that. So they actually just follow the reference track thinking, oh, they gave me this track, they want it like that. But maybe in the instructions, they said, we don't want something like that, but we like the spirit of that song, or we like this one part of the lyric that says this. That's why we're sending you this reference track, just to give you an idea of sort of a general vibe we want to go with. But maybe they don't want anything like that reference track. So really just following the directions and getting out of your own way of what you think is right for the project. It's a really important thing. So I appreciate you sharing that, man.
Yeah, actually, just to add to that really quick, that's a very common thing, especially when working with clients that aren't necessarily as musically inclined or don't know the terminology. So a lot of times, as a company, when we get a creative brief of some reference tracks, sometimes like they'll reference like a new artist, like let's say, a pop artist like Billie Eilish or something like that, right? But you look at their brand and you kind of see like, oh, that's not really going to fit for you. Are you sure, kind of thing. And as you dig deeper, you realize that all they wanted was just something modern, right? So again, it's an art form in itself. There's a trick to it. It's not easy to necessarily read between the lines all the time, but at the same time, you can kind of, if you do your research, you can kind of start to figure out at least what questions to ask if before you get started, so you don't go too far in the wrong direction.
Yeah, communication skills, that'll save you all the time. Just asking the right questions. Absolutely. All right, Trevor, how about you, man?
Yeah, just to button up on that a little bit. The phrase that you said, that it's an art form, that's something I think a lot of people need to like focus a little more on when getting certain briefs like this, because so many people treat them as checklists, where it's just like, okay, the song is soft rock, so my track needs to be soft rock, and it's this BPM, and it's this. Some of those things are important for sure, but it's a blend between science and art, and you have to kind of do both and consider both too, because that, I think that's one of those things, is the art part, that just trying to decode whatever it is that they said. Not many people do, because it is hard. Like, I understand it's super hard to really understand what they're saying. And 2, like, if you don't, like, you're going to get left in the dust, because like now we're just talking about translation, like things getting lost in translation and understanding what they're thinking and what you're thinking and what's different and all that stuff. So, I wanted to just emphasize the like, it's an art form part. Don't forget that, and make sure you focus on that, because that could be the difference. So my other common like mistake, or whatever the theme actually is here, is getting stuck in a loop, like literally in your DAW, and as well as creatively, like. And I don't mean this to say like, oh, try all these different genres and become a jack of all trades, because I actually don't think you should do that. But I do think that you should be, while you do have your own little space, whatever your favorite 1 or 2 genres are, you're like stepping outside and seeing what it looks like outside the like box, and kind of poking around and then coming back in is really healthy, because they're just, when you're stuck in your own box and you're doing the same production techniques, doing the same mixing techniques, you never get anywhere. And then you're known as the guy, and like, people know you already. Like, every time they hear you, they know your quality, what you're going to sound like, and they're not going to need it over and over again. And so you have to be somewhat malleable so that as you know, the music that you have to provide is changing, you're changing too. Not in the extreme way of like, oh well, they need rock and I'm a hip hop guy, so let me try and figure that out. But more along the lines of like, okay, I'm a hip hop guy, but like rock influences have been creeping into hip hop lately, so I should be listening to rock. I should be understanding how that's happening so that I can bring it into my world and keep up with the times. And also just in learning in general, like people like authors, writers, poet, like all these people, they do that. They step out of their world to go learn from other things and then come back and apply it. And I don't think as many people do that as they should. And so they get kind of like, well, I really and I remember growing up being one of these people and like seeing some of these people where it's like, I really like Linkin Park, so I'm just going to listen to Linkin Park. All music is going to sound like Linkin Park. And I'll see in 10 years, I'm still going to sound like Linkin Park. And it never changes, and it just stays in this little loop. And I think that, one, how boring, and two, like creatively, like I've discovered some of my more favorite stuff musically and technique wise by like stepping out, like and learning dubstep a little bit, and then coming back and being like, well, now my hip hop has this like little dubstep thing in it, or what, like doing that kind of thing. One, allows you to be, we look at TV and film as like a gig, right? Where we're just like, oh, they want X, Y, and Z, and I got to provide it to them. I don't need to be really creative. But that's not true, and it's really not true now. Like so much music is like stock sounding in a way from the past that really they want now this blend of, and I know because I'm a library owner, this blend of like what the client needs, which is a checklist, but then also your creativity. If you're somebody who has these creative ideas going on, you should blend them with what they're looking for, so that you just don't sound like a copy and paste of all the other stock music. And you're taking like, your style and your things that you've fallen in love with outside, you brought them into your track so that you have creativity blended with what they need. Because a lot of them are going to give you a checklist of like, I need a piano EDM album or whatever, and it's like, cool, but you put a little spice, little bit of your spice on top there, and that's from being able to step outside, learn new things, and come back in.
Yeah. And, and not even so much like just if you were, say, like a rock producer, go listen to a lot of EDM pop music or tropical pop music. And it's not so much that you're going to bring EDM into your rock, but you're actually maybe going to experiment with producing an EDM track. And there's going to be techniques you're going to learn specifically to that genre that you might be able to creatively bring back to your rock forte of what you want to do. So side chaining or even adding some synth leads or something like that. There could be some really cool things that you incorporate into your rock tracks that you had to step outside of your comfort zone to learn those things. So I couldn't agree more with that. That's one of the reasons why sync licensing made me a much better producer, because it forced me to start to listen to other styles of music. And when there were briefs coming in and it was a style that I wasn't really comfortable with, I had to get comfortable with it very quickly and try to figure out how they're doing an authentic sound, how they're getting that real sound that sounds like it belongs in that particular genre. And I usually didn't stay there, but after that experience, I'm like, that was kind of a cool synth idea that I, discovered while I was creating, this style. Maybe I can do something kind of cool with my rock or my, pop tracks, bringing that sort of element back over here. And just like what you said, there is the checklist of it has to be a certain BPM, a certain style, and even the emotion. But then there's always that sort of X factor of excitement that has to come out of your music. And nobody can really ever put their finger exactly on what it is. But there's always one track usually, or maybe there's a couple in a collection of tracks being pitched for an opportunity. And it's the one that has that excitement. And usually I find the excitement comes from that creativity. Like you said, that spark of creativity. That's the kind of cool, unique, interesting, sometimes a little off center. Something's not exactly what you were expecting, but it really just sort of excites people and it gets them going, I got to hear that again. And so if your music can deliver that emotion for people, you will find that even if they were asking, I've seen this happen so many times in my career, they wanted the, let's say, corporate track, but the track they ended up going with is not necessarily the one that they outlined. It was the one that got them excited. So it might have actually fallen a little outside of what they were looking for, but it excited them in some way and it got their creative juices going. And so sometimes, again, the checklist is important, but it's also about bringing your best, your artistic guess as to what you think is really going to get them moving and get them excited, and obviously bring some great emotion to their project or whatever it is that they're working on. So absolutely, man.
Yeah, I have an example that people can actually just go to, and it's super straightforward. And so the song Hella Good by No Doubt is a perfect example of of like somebody else's creativity on top of No Doubt. So I think Pharrell produced it or somebody, and
That was a Neptune's track.
it wasn't Neptune. Okay, so it was the Neptunes, and if you listen to No Doubt, it's the punk, you know, the I'm just a girl type stuff. And I don't think that was No Doubt, but they have that kind of stuff. And it's this punk rock female singer or whatever. And this song, Hella Good, came out, and it had electronic elements. The how does it go? It goes
I know exactly how it goes because, believe it or not, that was the first song I ever composed a track in. I made a cover version of it in Logic Pro 7, whatever it was, way back in college. I remember that track very specifically.
Okay, so that guitar riff, the why is it? I just had it in my mind. Well, underneath that guitar riff, which this song also is one of the best mixed songs I've ever heard. Underneath that guitar riff is like a buzz synth, like a really solid, clean sounding like synth, and it just fills your ears. And so underneath that, there's the synth. There's all these little spaceship sounds going on, on. No Doubt never had anything like that. And this is a perfect example of if some client who had a creative brand was like, I want a No Doubt song. And you got 5 tracks that were just punk rock, like No Doubt, and then you got Hella Good. I bet you they would pick Hella Good, even though Hella Good is a little bit different than what they've done in the past. And this, I think, is a perfect example of that, of like somebody else's creativity came in and brought something outside of the punk rock, realm and created this like really, really great, cool track. And that is exactly what, I mean, I've heard it in TV all the time. That's just an easy one to go find, but all the time where somebody's brief is like 90% what they ask for, and then that extra bit of themselves that just kind of takes it over the edge. So anyway, that was the first thing that popped in my mind. I wanted to
actually interject that. That's a great example, because I think that's the Neptunes basically made a career out of selling their style, and then it became a thing to where their clients, like wanted a style to, whether it be modernize their products, bands, or whatever artists, right? So you see that all the time. I mean, I see that all the time in advertising, especially like with older brands wanting to become more modernized and stuff like that. And they'll have an idea and they'll send out a brief saying like, oh, okay, we want this, and give out their examples and stuff like that. But what they're not telling you is they're looking for that next sort of Neptunes to come in and flip their brand on the head, and just do something kind of phenomenal with them. That's completely unexpected. So yeah.
Yep, great examples. It's so funny you brought up that one. I remember in college learning Logic and covering that song. I got to see if I have that. I might have bounced it at some point and emailed it to myself, but who knows? Too funny, man. So the next one I have here is, and this has been actually, for some reason, it's interesting, this has been popping up more commonly recently, is producers that are passively waiting for opportunities to come to them rather than making their own opportunities. So I've had this a couple of times in the last couple of weeks. It must just be a coincidence, but a few producers have reached out to me and they said, hey, Jesse, I'm working with this library. Been working with them for a year. The last 3 months, I haven't heard any. I mean, they were getting me placements up until about 3-4 months ago. Nothing's really come through in the last couple months. When do you think I should sort of cut my losses and get out of there? And my first question is always, well, have you emailed them, or have you called them? Have you talked to them? And a lot of them are saying, a lot of the producers that ask asking me that question, they're like, no, I didn't want to bother them. I'm like, you don't want to bother them. I mean, this is your partner, right? This is your career we're talking about. You're not bothering them. You're wanting to make sure, like, maybe they're in the hospital. Maybe something's wrong. I mean, you really should check in on the people that you're constantly hearing from. And if you sort of get crickets for a couple of months, there might be something wrong there that has nothing to do with the business, but maybe there's a personal thing. The company's going through some sort of an issue. Obviously, right now with coronavirus, who knows, right? What's going on with people? But if you're kind of sitting at your computer every day and just kind of waiting that some email pops up, or somebody texts you, or somebody calls you and says, we need your music, you're doing it wrong. You're doing this business wrong. In fact, what you should be doing is taking it upon yourself to be emailing and contacting your library partners on a weekly basis, if you can, if that's appropriate, if that's kind of where you feel like you guys can be communicating. And always ask them, what are you guys looking for? What are you working on? How can I be of service to you? This is what I'm doing every single week, every single month with my library partners that I still submit to. It's always, I don't want to just create something just because, I think this would be kind of cool. I'm always asking them, what are you guys working on? What are some of the things that you need? And if you can even give me a long list of a bunch of different music that you need for the next couple of months, that way I don't have to continuously always email you every week and ask you. But if you can basically just keep me busy for the next 6 months, I'll just continuously give you guys music. And so I think a lot of producers are just kind of stuck in this passive mode where they're just waiting for somebody to give them the opportunity, put the deadline, give them the sync fee, what they're going to get paid, and then they start working. And if you're doing it that way, you really are going to get left behind, because there are hardworking producers out there that are not waiting for that. They're not waiting for an opportunity. They're not waiting for briefs. They're creating their own opportunities by making themselves useful for libraries. So just make sure you're a little bit more proactive maybe than you have been. And that's how you're obviously going to get into the inner circle of libraries. And these are two library owners in front of you right now. And I'm sure they'll double down on that to say that it's the producers that are active, that are talking to them, that are emailing them, that are being more in their lives on a weekly or daily basis. Those are the ones that usually stand out when they have an opportunity to say like, hey, I need one of my producers to get on this gig. Well, if you're the one that's been not emailing them and not calling them for months, do you think they're going to reach out to you? They might even not remember you. Maybe they will, but you really don't want to be sort of a background thought to your library owner. So just make sure you guys are reaching out to people on a consistent basis. So anyways, that's my third one there. Mike, how about you? What's your next on your list?
Well, just to add to that a little bit too. Yeah, I see that all the time as well. Like with so basically in my experience, when a request is made for a certain style of track or whatever, like usually it's too late. So a lot of times, especially when clients come looking for stuff, say like, oh, do you have anything like this, right? And if you don't, then, if you have a 24-hour window, you got to hurry up and make it, or whatever it is that you got to do. So on the producer and composer side, it's good to just keep doing what you're doing and do that constantly and not have to wait, because as soon as your partner comes through, your library, whoever comes through and asks you, hey, we're looking for this, they're kind of looking for it right then and there, just because that's how, how fast this moves. Now, of course, like the better ones are able to plan ahead and see like, okay, we have this dip in our library and we need more of this. So, and then they can start to plan the albums in that way. So that's great when that happens. But a lot of times, yeah, it's just good to just keep working. And, and especially if you already have a rapport with a library, their style and yeah, reach out and keep that communication going on. So, but yeah, my third point is in basically handling revisions. And one mistake that I see a lot, and this actually, I see this fixed a lot with experience, so I think this is more something that I see a lot more with like newer producers or newer people in this game. So when working on revisions, I feel like it's best to keep it simple and keep it very specific to what's being asked. A lot of times when you get into that revision round, I think sometimes producers will get in that mode of like, oh, okay, they start hearing things that maybe they're not happy with the first time around, right? They start changing some stuff up. Well, the problem with that is maybe the, your library or creative director that you're working with, actually like those things, that you didn't like. So, and then when you change it up, it's kind of like, oh, wait a minute, what happened here? And then that changed up the entire vibe. And maybe it wasn't even that specific hook or anything like that, or anything about that sound, but maybe just the kind of emotion or vibe that it was adding to the track, that when you change that to, you think that you're making it better, you might end up losing something and then also going with the revision. So I think like when kind of dealing with revisions, like I said, like the more experienced ones are and I think this goes two ways. So the more experienced composers will hit those revisions and be like, here you go. And again, I think that's just having experience of knowing that it's like, okay, understanding like, hey, they like my track already, and it's just, they just need to fine tune it for some very specific reasons, and that's fine. So here you go. And then also, of course, like, the more experience that you get, the more you start to figure out like how much you need to and don't need to work, so it's like, it's kind of like you don't have to put so much work in, on yourself if there's already interest. And but yeah, that's a big mistake that I always see a lot, where it's like sort of, overdoing the revisions.
Yeah, and it should go without saying, but we do need to say it, that if a client tells you or a library tells you they love what you did except for X, Y, or Z, believe them, okay? They're telling you the truth. They're telling you exactly what they are feeling in terms of what you've submitted to them. So just because you think that, well, are you sure? Because I don't think that kick was that great. Let me go ahead and swap it out. If they didn't mention anything about your kick and they like everything going on, then yes, absolutely right. You don't need to interpret their words differently or think, well, I'll just make it all better, because they're telling you exactly what they want to tell you, which is that most of it's working except for, one little thing, or change this or change that. So again, that's part of getting out of your own opinion, getting out of your own perspective, and really serving the client and their needs. I've had a lot of placements in my career when I'm like, really? Like, that track sounds not so great. You sure you want to use that? That's what you wanted. And they're like, yeah, we love it. It's great. Okay. Why would I would be so foolish to say, no, don't pay me. Don't give me the placement. I don't think you should, because I don't like, that track is not the best that I can do. For them, the people that hold the purse strings, that have the opportunity, that have the money, and they're telling you they like it, just believe them. I think that's really great advice, man. Absolutely. Trevor, how about you, man? What's next on your list?
Okay. So my next one would probably be, I have two, so I'm trying to decide which one, but my next one would be, so it's going to sound weird, but don't always focus on the music. And what I mean by that is producers will just be like, I need to make my song, my track or whatever, or even the vocalist and everybody coming together to make a different version of what they think they're supposed to make, right? So if they think they're supposed to make, jingly pop female tune or whatever, they'll listen to the references and then try to just make one of those. But what they're not thinking about, and this is something that I think everybody does, like even I do, like when I used to make tracks and stuff, even towards, more recently, I'd still do it, which is, I don't think of it enough as like, this is going to go with visuals. And the person that is going to actually use this to make me money, what do they need? Because yes, they told me they needed a genre, but they didn't, like, they're not going to sit there and be like, well, I need edit points. I need some ups. I need some downs. I need that sound that's normally loud in the record, probably not that loud because people are going to be talking, or people don't, for the most part, don't think about how the music is useful. They just think, oh, I got to make it, and I got to make it like this other thing. And so I'm really just focused on the music itself and not the song as almost as a tool for somebody else. And so I think, listening, whether it's active, this is a really hard thing too, because you get sucked up in the shows or whatever, but actively listening to how music is used is one thing. I think score and composers and stuff do this well, but like pop producers and hip hop and stuff, they don't as much. But really pay attention to why things are used in relation to what's going on in the show, whether it's because there's bouncing around everywhere, or because it's a dramatic moment, or because of whatever the tone, like all of those things and how they used it. Think about those things. Think about the edits that they make, the layout, all that stuff needs to be in your mind when you're producing, because you're not producing music just for the sake of people listening to music. You're producing a product for somebody to use. You're producing this tool that more than likely an editor is going to chop up and turn parts down or EQ a piece out. He's going to do all this stuff to it anyway. And so you want to give them all of the tools within your track to get placed, or else you're just you're not considering them, and they'll know when they listen that they aren't being considered. And then they not only that, when they go to try and use it, it's going to be hard, because you're just going to, like, I've seen so many tracks that are just like full energy the whole time, and it's cool to listen to, but it doesn't really do well once you put it to TV. Like your drums and everything are just hitting at 127 all the time, and you're going really hard and everything's pumped up, and it sounds cool to listen to and jam to for a minute and a half or whatever, but you're not, it just doesn't work with visuals. It's just too overbearing, or there's no moments of down and then back up. And so a lot of that stuff isn't thought about when making a track. And so I'll get a submission, I'm like, you know what, I like it for about 5-10 seconds. I don't need to listen anymore though, because nothing else happens. You may have those musical changes, you may have things come in and out and stuff, but it's not editable, it's not usable. And that, I don't think people think about when they're making the tracks as much as they should.
Yeah, I can definitely double on that, because I've had many gigs where they'll send me the actual video file that I am allowed to compose to if I want to, and sometimes I'll go, I don't want to do that. I know what they need, 30 seconds, I know what the reference is, and I'll compose 2 or 3 different options. And what I'll do at the end of that is I'll bounce the track and then I'll basically put it against the visuals and kind of just see how does it look. And most of the time it never works. It just doesn't work because I wasn't considering, like you said, I wasn't looking at the visual as I was composing and watching the visual and pulling that actual video file into Logic Pro and watching it evolve as I compose that track. And most of the time, now I've learned that lesson. So if I am lucky enough, I think that's really a great thing when they give you any sort of a visual that you can use, even if it's just animation, anything like that. It's just like still pictures. Use it and pull it into your DAW and compose along with it, because it will make a huge difference in terms of, you'll know right away. You should start to get a feel like, is this helping move this story along? Is it matching the visuals? Does it feel like just completely out of left center? You'll get this kind of vibe that it feels like a commercial, or it feels like a spot, or it feels like the right kind of vibe for whatever they're trying to do. Now, if you get a custom gig and they don't send you the visuals, they don't send you any, visual mediums or anything like that, just do your best to try to find something, maybe a past campaign that I've already put up, and you can look it up on YouTube or look it up online, or maybe find a competitive sort of a product or another commercial that's kind of in the same sort of a vibe, and use those visuals to kind of clue you in as to where to go. So sometimes you're not going to be given that blueprint, that roadmap for exactly the visuals you should be matching to, but having something visual up on screen as you're composing is a really, really smart thing. And even if it's literally, downloading a commercial, putting it into like QuickTime Player and just looping it, and just having that loop the entire time while you're composing, and just have that as an influence of the sort of pacing or the type of sounds that you should be going for. Really, really important. I can't agree with that more, man. So my last one here, and I want to get your guys' last one, will be one of the biggest mistakes is producers that are focusing on the past and what they've already done exclusively, instead of really just doubling down and focusing on what they're working on today and what they should be working on in the future. So I've had a lot of these questions where producers say, hey, Jesse, I just got this placement in a NBA game. What do you think I'm going to be making on that? How much money am I going to get? How many times do you think I should be getting, royalties for that kind of a placement, and this and this and this? And obviously with that kind of a question, I have no idea, because I don't know how long your track was placed. I don't know if it was foreground, background, was it vocals, was it instrumental? There's so many factors and variables, the ratings, time of day, all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. So that could be pennies, it could be hundreds, it could be thousands of dollars. So who knows, right? But I made this mistake early on in my career, where when I would get it, or I'd be notified by a library, hey, you just got a placement in this. I remember my head was like, all right, 6 figures in royalties coming my way. I'm set. I'm good. And it would make me lazy in a way. It would just make me think like I'm done. Like I don't really have to work that hard anymore. Now I've got that passive income coming in, but you really don't know what you're going to get in the future. And sometimes you're pleasantly surprised by those royalties and those placements. And sometimes you're really, really, really disappointed by the little amount of money that you got from something you thought was going to be a lot of income for yourself. So it's very tempting, and we all kind of fall prey to this, where we get like a nice big placement and then we kind of like hang our laurels on the opportunities or the accomplishments, the achievements of the past, and we kind of just stay there, and it's a really luring, tempting thing to do. But it does distract you from what you should be doing, which is just focusing on here and now, today, creating new music, and always be building up your catalog. Because what will happen if you just stay in this kind of a mindset where you're just thinking about how you can work forward today, move forward, create your own, if it's going to be a Sync 60 challenge or putting together your own album, whatever it is you want to do. If you're focusing on that, what you'll start to find is that since your focus is moving forward, that royalty stream and that passive income will just start to pile up in the background, and you'll start to just kind of see these royalty checks coming in, creeping in, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And and those are great, and those are rewarding, and I think you should celebrate yourself and give yourself a pat on the back when you start seeing those grow. But don't stay focused over there, because that's the past. That's stuff you've already done. You should actually be focusing most of your energy and time on what you want to do moving forward. How are you going to be serving your clients this week, this month, this next quarter? So just make sure you're not getting too lured in by past accomplishments or past placements, and always be thinking about the future. I think it's just one thing to just be in a much better mental state of mind to make sure that you succeed. So anyways, that's my last one. Mike, why don't you go ahead and give us your last one here?
Yeah. And first, before I do that, I just want to say that all of these mistakes that we've been talking about, it's stuff that obviously I'm seeing as a library owner, but I just want to say to everybody, I've made all of these mistakes. So, so this is as much coming from experience, and, me and probably Jesse and Trevor, I won't speak for them, but especially me, trying to save you guys from the years and years and years of heartache that I've put myself through. So anyway, that said, my last one is basically one common thing is playing it safe. I'm seeing, especially nowadays, I think it's a lot more crucial nowadays to be authentic. And that doesn't necessarily mean being experimental. You still have to think of this as like, okay, well, this is music that's in support of visuals, but and we touched up on this a little bit earlier, but like, yeah, just having that authentic something about what it is, so this industry has had like sort of a bad rap like since the beginning of being kind of rolled into well, there is stock music that's out there and everything too, but like everything is, that has like sort of a negative connotation, so now to the point where in the past, like there was a distinction between like stock music and premium music and all this kind of stuff. Well, now there's so much music out there that everything has to be authentic and kind of premium, so and especially with clients these days, a lot of clients are coming to us looking for, one of the big things I see in briefs is like, we want this to sound like, like a major label tune that everybody loves, but you don't know what it is underneath it. Maybe they just don't want to pay for that, but but it has to sound that way. Or maybe it's just a matter of like, but those major label tunes, they need it to be more easier to edit to, and you can't do that with an artist track all the time. So, but they're still looking, what they're really saying is they're still looking for that same authenticity. And I think that's really important. And I see it a lot where, even with giving out a brief and giving instructions and stuff like that, producers will, like I said, play it safe, give you exactly what it is, spit back out exactly what it is that you kind of gave them. And I think there's also a hint in there. It's just like, okay, take that as inspiration and use that as a jumping off point and put yourself into it, as much as you can. And if it fits with that's great and and everyone wins kind of thing. If it doesn't fit, that doesn't necessarily mean that your music's not good. It doesn't necessarily mean that, you did it wrong or anything like that. It just might mean that your particular brand doesn't fit with the brand that you're working for, at that particular time. So there's a lot of different variables that happen for things to line up. That's a lot of times out of our control, so I think the best thing to do is to just be as authentic as possible within the guidelines that you're given. And I think that'll always make the best impression.
I dig it. Yeah. Be bold and don't take anything personally. Great points of advice, man. Trevor, how about you? What's the last on your list here?
It's funny. Mike, you kind of took a little bit of what I was going to say. But I'll expand on it a little bit because it's something that has been bugging me recently. And this probably should have been my first one, because if it's for people who actually aren't bought in to TV and film yet, it's for the people who, are in the record world or whatever and look down on the TV and film world. And chances are, if you're this far into the podcast, you probably are bought in. So this should have been first. But anyway, my one thing I want to be able to do is change people's minds about the TV and film world of music, because I have seen, as far back as yesterday, I have seen videos and opinions of sync licensing as just this, like, this is where you throw your extras. This is where, like, the tracks that aren't that good, you put them there and hopefully they make you $5 or something down the road. Like, and maybe that was true in some senses in the past. Like, I do know that there were a lot of libraries and stuff that were kind of known as the Walmart of music, and cool. That opinion isn't going to be and isn't really true anymore. Like, you look at a lot of these libraries and it's like, if they are the Walmart of music, they're gone. And you as a music person, like, I've known so many people, this is like a pet peeve of mine, these people who are like, I've had an email once with like a really big artist's manager. And so therefore I'm going to make it and I'm going to make a bunch of money and I'm going to spend all my music in that direction, and then look down at everything else. And the TV and film area is one of those things, even though, and I think, Jesse, you've had videos of people talking about this where they'll leave that and go to sync licensing because chasing the big buck for a year or whatever, can have its rewards, but TV and film licensing is very broad and is growing. Like, there's more TV programs, there's more online programs, it's so broad, and more money is coming in. It allows you to, make money in music. And the what I wanted to kind of express is, if you treat it that way, if you treat it as like, oh, well, I'm not going to give my best stuff here, or I'm not going to give really high quality stuff, I'm just going to kind of half-ass it or whatever. you're not going to win, because there's plenty of people who realize I can make a living off of this. So I'm going to just like give it some really great music, give these companies some really great music. And same with the companies themselves, like they're landing big placements and deals and stuff by saying our stuff is just as good as records. So if you're the one who's like gonna just give whatever to people and expect, like a little bit of royalties or whatever, then you're not going to get very far, because this industry has evolved past that. It's evolved past the Walmart of music at this point. Just like Mike said, all these clients are expecting hit records, and they are, because you can do it. You can now in 2020, you can have a small microphone, set up and your little studio and a laptop and make a hit record, and they know that. And you should have the mentality that you should have, your quality stuff should go to this place, because it is a good place for income. And the people who are doing it know that. And so I've seen so many of these kind of like, they're still kind of looking down on this type of industry, and really they're just hurting themselves. Like I see it and I'm like, oh, okay, that's one less person to compete with. But at the same time, like you're hurting yourself, and you're also hurting other people, because other people will see your opinion about the TV and film world and be like, oh, well, you have a cool studio in your picture, so you must know what you're talking about. And then they don't try it. And it might be exactly what they need, like financially and creatively, but this kind of like, well, I don't understand it, and I think I look down on it, so therefore like I'm gonna shame it or whatever. So that one was more for them, for the people who are kind of looking from the outside looking in, being like, it's stock music or whatever. Please cut that out and just try it, because I think everybody who has tried it and has really dove into it, like they've realized like this is a thing, and this you got to put high quality in there, and you will succeed, and you will have success in this if you treat it as something that can bring you success,
Yeah, and a lot of that stuff that you hear, either if it's on that side of it where they're like, don't get involved, it's stupid, it's lowbrow, it's, it's the, like you said, the cheap bin, you don't want to do that. Or people that are given whack advice about how to succeed in music licensing. The common ingredient there is they usually don't have any experience in the business at all. They've just heard something, read something, threw their music on some sort of a royalty-free site or something like that, and they think that's sync licensing, right? So a lot of times you'll hear these kind of opinions, pieces of advice, and they're usually from people that either didn't even get involved in the actual TV film industry to actually do this professionally, or they dabbled a little bit, didn't get immediate results, and then just wrote off the whole thing as like, see, I told you, it was all just a waste of time. So, and I find that like usually people either have ears to hear this or they don't. I find that usually younger people in their early 20s, mid 20s, usually can't really hear what I'm saying with this kind of a business, because they're still on that path of, I want to be famous, I want to blow up on social media, I want to have sort of a viral hit. More power to you. If that's where your heart's telling you to go, then just follow that. You don't want to look back on your life and regret that you didn't give 100% of whatever your goal was. But I usually find that if that doesn't work out for people in their mid-20s, they start to look for other alternative, more practical ways to start earning income with their music. And so, we are sort of the rare exceptions, us three here, because we got started in our, teens and early 20s. So, but most people, it takes them a little bit of time, and it may be a couple of years before they start to see like, okay, there is something here, and they will probably kick themselves that they didn't listen when they were in their early 20s or mid 20s, but what are you going to do? No regrets. So whenever you do come across this podcast or these resources and you are feeling that like, okay, it's time to try this, give this a shot, just be aware that it's never too late. It doesn't matter. I mean, I have students that are in their 70s that are getting started with music libraries, believe it or not, and getting placements and doing really well with them. So there's no excuse. Like, I'm too old. No, you're not. I've never used a DAW program before. Who cares? You can learn how to do it. There's plenty of free tutorials online. And it's never too late to actually get started with this stuff. And the time is now to really start getting serious about your sync licensing career. So with that being said, those are our most common mistakes that we've seen. We are just trying to make sure that you guys save yourself months and maybe years of going down dead-end paths and then winding up really regretting some of the choices you made. So just make sure that you're listening to this and putting these points of advice into action into your daily life, and then as you proceed with this business and with this industry. So thank you so much, Mike and Trevor. Appreciate you guys. Thank you for your tips and all your great insights today. And stay tuned, guys. We'll have another episode for you just next Friday. Thank you for listening to the Sync My Music podcast. If you enjoyed the show and want me to do more episodes, all that I ask is that you leave me a review on whatever platform or app that you're listening to. It just takes a few seconds. I'll never charge for this podcast, and I want to keep it 100% ad-free. And your review right now will help me do just that. Thank you so much.